am honored today to introduce Abel Núñez, the Executive Director of CARECEN, the Central American Resource Center. Abel joined CARECEN as Executive Director in March 2013, and I was actually part of the search committee that hired him as I was serving on the board of directors at that time. Abel has a well-rounded background in nonprofit management and fundraising, as well as a history of community activism. In fact, I met Abel in 1998 when I was working for Casa del Pueblo, a community organization in Columbia Heights when I was in graduate school, and I thought I wanted to go into the nonprofit sector. Prior to CARECEN, Abel was Associate Director of Centro Romero in Chicago and was primarily responsible for day-to-day operations, fiscal management, program administration, and communications. Before he moved to Seattle, he worked in DC for the Latino Civil Rights Center, and from 1998 to 2000, he was also on the staff of CARECEN, serving as its first Citizenship and Civic Participation Project Coordinator, and later as its Deputy Director. Nationally, Mr. Abel has served since 2008 on the board of the Salvadoran American National Network, and he is one of the founding members of the Residency Now campaign, which was launched in January 2012 and seeks to obtain lawful permanent residency for immigrants from El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua under temporary protected status. Abel has a bachelor's of business administration from Hofstra University, and he received Georgetown University's John Thompson Jr. Legacy of a Dream Award in 2017. Please give Abel a warm Rotary welcome.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you for those that are on Zoom. It's a new world of hybrid meetings. But again, thank you. You know, CARECEN has had an incredible relationship with this club. Not only having Jennifer as one of our board members, but also just the support that we've received in our organization to make it grow. You know, before I sort of start my spiel in terms of, you know, what CARECEN is, what we've done and what we're currently doing, particularly with the support of the club, I do want to just say that, you know, we're living at a moment where immigrants are under attack, right? And basically it's gotten reduced to a border issue. But I just want to say that immigrants are a blessing to this nation. Immigrants are a blessing to wherever they land, whether it's here in the United States or outside of the US. Every country that receives immigrants benefits from their culture, from their labor, from their energy. And I think we need to begin to change that narrative to ensure that we can put in place good policies that both strengthen our nation, but also support and protect people that are seeking help. So just a little bit about CARECEN, so the organization that I represent. So CARECEN was founded in 1981 by incoming Central Americans, particularly Salvadoreños, and I am from El Salvador, that were fleeing the Civil War. El Salvador had a civil war from 1980 to 1992 when the peace accords were signed, and they made DC their home. As a matter of fact, Washington, D.C. has the second largest Salvadoran community in the nation. And although LA has the largest community, Salvadorians actually make up the majority of all foreign-born people in the DMV. So we're the majority. That's why you can find a pupusa anywhere here, and not so many tacos. I have to tell my Mexican friends, unfortunately, no good tacos here yet. But part of the work of CARECEN was to help the immigrants that were coming in the early 80s. And, you know, one of the things is that I think as Americans, we're proud of our history of being a country of immigrants. But we always forget that the introduction of immigrants is always messy, right? Because it was true for the Irish, it was true for the Italians, it was true for any group that has come and made this country greater, right? It's always this messiness. We're experiencing that now with the Venezuelan community that unfortunately has had to flee their country because it's no longer livable, and has sought refuge in multiple countries, but now in the U.S. And we're seeing sort of this discussion of the we versus them, which is an eternal discussion that the U.S. has. But as Salvadorans were coming in the early 80s, it was no different, right? Because it was a huge community coming in. They were fleeing war. They had war trauma, and CARECEN is a legacy organization from that effort, from that advocacy effort. And actually, there are multiple CARECENs around the country. We're all independent organizations, but they were created to first provide services to help integrate the incoming immigrants. But second, it was a space where we can advocate and ensure that there were good policies put in place to not only help integrate folks into the local community, but also change the national dialogue and national laws that impact all immigrants. So for example, Jennifer mentioned a program called Temporary Protective Status. That is a humanitarian program that Congress approved in 1990 to ensure that people that have either a natural disaster or a man-made disaster in the country of origin can get protected in the US. So Salvadorians and actually CARECEN played a role in actually enacting that into law in 1990. So we're very proud of that. So currently, what does CARECEN do? So CARECEN has two major programs. So we have a housing program that has basic three pillars. One is rental education. So we educate renters in DC to make sure that their rights are respected, to make sure they live in dignified spaces, and to ensure that government responds to the needs of people that need housing. So we collaborate with other organizations, we organize the community, we push for funding so that housing can be better for everyone. We also help mitigate, with the banks when people get in trouble with their mortgage. So we make sure that people stay in their housing. We actually do a lot of work with condo and co-op associations to make sure that they do what they need to do to keep their housing, right? Because that's what they own. That's their stake in the U.S. And so we help them to make sure that they are complying with all DC laws, with the covenants that they have agreed to with the banks, with the city, and to make sure that they can continue to live in their buildings. And one of the things for example, if you've heard the news a couple of weeks ago, there was an explosion on Columbia Road. There was a building that there was an explosion in the building. It was a kitchen fire, and it happened across the street from our offices. So our housing team responded. We are working with all of those tenants to make sure that they can continue to live in that building. It needs to gets repaired, but to make sure that their rights are respected. We actually organize them as a tenant organization so that they have legal standing. And so we do that type of work all over the district to make sure that renters have a larger voice in what they in their living condition. But we also do financial literacy because we believe that people should start creating wealth independent of where they are in the economic ladder. So that's our housing program. But then our biggest and oldest program is our legal program on immigration. So we do family immigration law. So that means family petitions. We help with also humanitarian applications such as temporary protective status. There are a lot of visas that the U.S. government provides for victims of violence, of crime, victims of if they've been trafficked, or people that are in domestic violence situations. So we help people steward them through that complicated process of trying to stay here legally in the U.S. Just to give you an example, a personal example, I became a U.S. citizen in 1996. At that time, the cost of applying to become a citizen was $116, and the application was only 4 pages long. That application now is 20 pages long, and it costs $785. So for us, it is important to make sure that people understand and that we can steward them to the process so that they are successful in becoming citizens. And it is also the program that the Rotary Club of DC has been supporting for a very long time. And so what we do there is that we not only in our legal department do we help people apply by helping them with the application, but we also prepare them for the test and the interview. because it is very intimidating for you to go to a government office and have to answer with a better than an 80% rate. Out of the 100 questions, you get asked 20 questions. And what we do is not only teach people how to pass the test, but also the responsibilities of being citizens, right? So one of the things that we do the moment that that they become citizen is that we register them to vote, we get them their passport to make sure, but we also teach them the importance and the responsibility of what it means to be a voter. Right, so we are a 501c3, so we don't promote candidates or parties, but we do promote civic engagement. We do promote people participating in our process. And the funding that we have from the Rotary Foundation for this year is actually supporting us in upgrading our building. So we are one of those spaces in DC, a nonprofit, that we're lucky to have our own space. We actually are part of a mixed unit building that has private ownership of condos, but we have our space there, and we have a small little school. We call it the Escuelita. But being a brick building, over the years, it needs repairs. So the funding that the Rotary Foundation has given us this year will allow us to do tuck pointing. For those that have brick homes would know what that is. It's basically reinforcing the brick. We have actually remodeled the inside of the building, a fresh renovated bathroom, because we want to make sure that our students, when they come in, they are in a comfortable space that allows them to learn and to prepare for that exam. We tend to focus on people that are elderly and that have issues with learning, or may have not received the full education in their country of origin. So not only are they negotiating the process of immigration, but they're negotiating language, culture, and we want to make sure that they are prepared and ready to be successful. So just to give you some numbers, we have 3 sessions of 12 weeks, a curriculum that helps prepares them for the test and exam. We see about 280 students per year. And on average, 84 people become American citizens every year that come through our programs. Because the process right now is taking anywhere from 6 months to 8 months, from the moment someone submits their application to the moment that they are at the swearing ceremony, which is a very beautiful thing. I remember when I did it, it is the moment that you raise your hand and you pledge your allegiance to this nation, and you know that you're becoming part of this country, even though you have been already contributing. And I'm proud to say that when I became a citizen, so did my sister. We encourage our parents, and they became citizens. And I think that that's something that I want to leave here, that most people that come here, most immigrants, they want to be part of this nation. They want to learn English. They want to contribute. And our organization is set up to help in that integration and to ensure that they get that footstep into the U.S. so that then they can contribute, right? And we have, and all the cultures that have come, all the countries that have come, have brought not only their labor, but they've brought their culture. Where we would be without the Vietnamese community, right? The Laotian community. We have, we enjoy pasta from the Italian immigrants, right? And the Irish and all the communities that have come. And so CARECEN is there to ensure that the newest community, primarily Latinos, because our strength, our cultural strength is our Spanish speakers, ensure that they have an easy path. And we only do that with your support, because we don't do it alone. And so one, I want to just thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of all the clients that we serve, of all the citizens that are now voters, that are now becoming part of the fabric of America. So thank you for giving me a time. I know that we have a Q&A, and I know they say keep it brief, so I'll end my comments there, but I will just answer any questions that you may have.
Hi, thank you for that amazing presentation. And I actually have 2 questions. I'm wondering, what is the capacity? How many people can you help at one time? And the second, you mentioned you try to help people with wealth generation, no matter what part of the cycle they're in. And I'm curious to know what tactics you use for that.
Yes, so in terms of capacity, we serve about 5,000 people each year in both of our programs and throughout the other special projects that we do. We've actually increased our capacity in our legal department. So when Jennifer was on the board, I think our legal team was about 5 people. Now we have 15 people. We have 3 attorneys. We have about 10 paralegals, and they're what's called DOJ accredited. And that means that the Department of Justice accredits them, and they can act as attorneys in immigration court. So it means that we have a greater capacity to serve. We're just adding a couple of fellows that will be focusing on unaccompanied minors. So we're proud to say that we can give a consultation to anybody that calls us right now. We receive about anywhere between 2,500 people calling us every year. In terms of building wealth, I mean, part of what we do is education. There's, when I came here, I asked, are our community, are they unbanked? And they're not. They're underbanked, meaning that they engage with the financial instruments that we have here, but they just don't know how to use them. So what we do is we teach them what it is, what they are, how they use them. We actually bring folks from the financial industry, from the banks, to kind of teach them what's insurance, what are credit cards, how not to get in trouble, what's 401ks. So many of our community members have 401ks, but they have no idea what to do with it. Right? They just know they put money in it, and they don't know how to build wealth and how to use it as a mechanism to build wealth. A lot of our communities also own property, and in the U.S., home ownership is one of the ways that we transfer wealth to the next generation. And so we teach them how that works, why that is like that. And so for us, education is key, and then partnering with the actual people that do the work. So we're not a bank, but we bring bankers to actually work with them. But we teach them what they need to be doing and what are the best practices.
So is there a membership to the organization? And the other thing is, how do you track the people that you help and the people that get involved? I guess those are two different questions.
Yeah. So how do we track? So I'm sorry, what was your first question? The membership. So no, we are not a membership organization. So we have, the people that we serve are our clients, and we have staff, and we have our board, but we don't have memberships. There are other groups here. Actually, some of you might have heard Casa de Maryland. They do have a membership model. I'm proud to say that Casa de Maryland was founded at CARECEN. They were the CARECEN version in Maryland, and so they are our I guess proud child, because they have grown. But no membership. What it is, how do we track folks? We have like databases, and then we do follow-ups every 6 months to see where people are at. A lot of that is because our contracts mandate that we keep track of our success rate. So we have multiple ways of just who comes in, basic data, services they received, but then we do follow-up on that. And for volunteers, yes, actually the citizenship program is one of the best ways that people can volunteer, because we always need people to prepare them. So one of the things in our citizenship program that we do is actually mock interviews. And that's when we need folks to come in, people that they haven't seen ever, and to just put them to what it's going to feel like when they're at USCIS office. And for anyone interested, I can share my information, and we would love to partner, not just with the funds, but for you to volunteer at CARECEN and help make our citizenship program even stronger. So the question was, what was our yearly budget? So our budget now is $4 million. So when I was hired, it was 700,000. So we've grown a bit. We went from 13 employees to 15 employees. One of the things that I didn't mention in my presentation is that 2 years ago, CARECEN was one of the organizations that actually responded to the incoming buses that were being sent by Governor Abbott from Texas and Governor Ducey from Arizona. And so we helped transition those immigrants and help them get to where they needed to go, or help them resettle here in DC.
I wanted to also thank Abel. He always volunteers for our career fair when we call him to do anything for our kids. So thank you for that. And I wanted to mention it. Can you touch on the growing population of Central Americans in DC, like from the time you took over to now? How has it doubled, tripled, et cetera?
So the population, so like I mentioned, Salvadorans make up the largest foreign-born population in the Washington, D.C. area. And that is because in the early 60s, there were diplomats that actually brought people from a very small town in El Salvador. And so by the late 70s, early 80s, it was like a nuclear community. Actually, for those familiar with the Adams Morgan, Mount Pleasant neighborhood, Sacred Heart Catholic Church was the epicenter, because that was the only church that offered Spanish Mass. And so, but when the war exploded, and you have to remember that when the war started in 1980, it was an urban war, but then it went to the rural areas and it created mass displacement. So those people first actually went to Guatemala, Mexico, and refugee camps, but eventually they started making their way to the US. Most people that come from El Salvador would go always to California, LA, because that's the land, like, sort of route. But because there was a nuclear community here in DC, people kind of went right when they hit the border, and they ended up in DC. So in the 80s, there was about 85, there was an explosion of Salvadorans. And when the war ended in 1992, by that time, there were people that already had their immigration status, they were citizens, and began to bring their family members. So right now we have over 300,000 Salvadorans in this community. I mean, I always say we're bridging DC to Baltimore, and we're bridging DC to Richmond, because our community no longer is in Washington, DC. It's actually, there are more people in Virginia and in Maryland than actually physically in DC. Part of it is that gentrification process where vulnerable communities and low-income communities are being forced because of the high cost of housing that we have here. But yeah, it continues to grow. We will probably be the largest community, although Mexican community is coming up strong too as well.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that our membership was aware that when you refer to our support, a lot of that support has come through our community service grants, which is a Rotary Foundation function, and think about them when you decide whether or not to contribute to the DC Foundation. Sorry. Just a small ad.
No. Thank you. And it, like I said, we don't do this work alone. We do it with volunteers. It's just not the staff, but we also do it with the support. So the Rotary support for our citizenship program has been critical. It has allowed us to grow, not just in our programming, but with the big grant that we get, we also have been able to do a lot of work with our infrastructure to provide just a better environment for our students to learn. So thank you.
So I have a softball question, and then just what's going on in the country now, right? From a few years ago, all we heard in the news was about MS-13 this and MS-13 that. But just recently, there was something about how great things are in the country and in El Salvador, and how safe it is. So I wonder if you could touch on that, and also tell us what CARECEN means.
Yes, so I'll start with CARECEN. So CARECEN stands for the Central American Resource Center. So we use the acronym CARECEN for short. For short, the original name was the Central American Refugee Center, and we took the name refugee because that's a legal status that that Salvadorians fleeing war were never given. We were just treated as immigrants or irregular immigrants, undocumented. But after the peace accords, we decided to change the name to resource. Now, as to what your question specifically, yes. So Salvador has been known for war, for after the war ended, gang violence, MS-13, 18th Street, were very sort of vicious gangs, actually the youth gangs that actually also operated here in the District of Columbia, and they became an international gang. But the current president has made significant efforts in reducing that violence. Now, there's a question whether the way he's doing it is appropriate, but the reality is that for everyday people, that violence has subsided, right? So having said that, the conditions in El Salvador have improved in terms of the violence, but we continue to see people migrating from El Salvador. Right now, I just got a statistic that in Mexico, the request of unaccompanied minor for asylum in Mexico has tripled, right? So that means that the underlying conditions of poverty are still there, and people cannot live and have a dignified life, and unfortunately have to leave their country to do so. But yes, as it relates to safety, the country is turn it around. We will see long-term what that means, because the president has built one of the largest jails in Latin America, and the way he's fixing the problem is through incarceration. He has about 20% of the population incarcerated at this moment, with about a 10% not guilty of anything, but have gotten caught up. So there are questions about his tactics, but the results are real. He has about an 80% approval rating, and about a 90% approval rating on the tactics that is using. So it's not black or white, good or bad, but for normal people in El Salvador, the violence has gotten better. The economic situation, the poverty has not.
So how do you make sure people don't forget their cultures and they're able to, maintain it?
So, in this area, because of the large numbers, is easier. But for example, if you just look at the restaurant landscape, there are a lot of Salvadorian restaurants. I think everybody knows what a pupusa is, right? And so, during the summer, there are multiple festivals, specifically either Salvadorian festivals or festivals that are specific to Latin America, but Salvadorians played a larger role just because of our population. And so, in that sense, in this area, is very easy to maintain our culture. I lived in Chicago for 13 years, and everybody in Chicago assumed I was Mexican, because everybody that speaks Spanish or is Latino is assumed to be Mexican. In those areas, the Mexican culture is really prominent. So is in LA. As a matter of fact, in most of the states in the US, Mexican nationals are the largest group. But because this area has such a large Salvadoran community, and in Virginia, in Maryland, in DC, it's just easier. So, for example, this weekend they had Fiesta DC, which is a festival, a Latin American festival. Some chefs got together and broke a Guinness record of making the largest pupusa in the world, right? Only in this area would you probably would see that. Again, it has been the length of time we've been here, about 40 years, that it's been a sizable community that continues to bring that in. When I meant we bring, as immigrants, we bring everything, not only our labor, but our culture, our food. And I think food is also the best way to maintain a culture, right? Most communities, by the third generation, they may not speak the language, they've lost some of the things, but they will still eat the same food that grandmother made, right? So food is the last thing that we lose in a culture. That's why in a lot of Italian households, Irish households, they still eat some of the same food.
So our club has, by the way, I was going to ask you about Casa de Maryland, which I am quite familiar with, and you answered before I asked the question. Thank you. We have a tradition in this club, of planting a tree in the honor of our speakers. This is a certificate for the tree that's being planted in your name, in your honor. There will be GPS coordinates that you will have, so you can go and visit your tree. And after it's grown and got some leaves on it, you can sit in the shade and have a sandwich.
Thank you.
A papusa. And here's a pin that goes with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Much.
Thank you, everyone.